Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 763. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about sailboats and islands, beaches and walled cities, kayaks, and communist history as we go to the beautiful country of Croatia.
Should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Let's talk about Croatia. I'd like to welcome to the show Kate McCulley from AdventurousKate.com, a travel writer, travel blogger, and friend who's come to talk to us about Croatia. Kate, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm excited to be here.
I'm a little surprised that we've never had you on before because I've known you for a while, but this is our first opportunity to do an interview. What's your connection with Croatia?
Oh, I adore Croatia. I've been visiting Croatia since 2012, and it's always been one of my favorite countries since I first arrived. But things really kicked into gear last year in summer 2020 when I ended up inadvertently stuck in Croatia for 2 months as I awaited to get a visa to arrive in the Czech Republic.
I can think of worse places to get stuck.
Oh, yeah, terrible. I mean, originally I was in Serbia. Long story short, I'm American. My boyfriend is British and a permanent resident in the Czech Republic. And there weren't a lot of places where we both could be during COVID. So we met up in Serbia. But after 2 weeks in Serbia, there was some political unrest going on. And the fact that people were constantly changing borders open, borders closed, borders open, borders closed. We were like, yeah, let's just go to Croatia and enjoy the seaside and be somewhere a little bit more stable in the time of COVID. And we waited it out. And eventually I was permitted to return to the Czech Republic as a partner of a permanent resident.
Excellent. Well, and Croatia appreciated you coming, apparently, since you just won a award from Croatia. What's the name of the award?
Yeah, I was very pleased. It's called the Golden Pen. And within the Golden Pen Awards, which are awarded to all kinds of travel journalists, bloggers, videographers, there's also the Grand Prix, which is the top winner in the category. And I won the Grand Prix for the blog social independent publisher division. So I was very pleased about that. I love Croatia so much. And it really meant a lot to hear that Croatia loves me back in the same way.
And how could they not? And why should someone go to Croatia?
In my opinion, Chris, Croatia is the best summer destination on the planet. It is summer personified. You're jumping into the Adriatic. It is the clearest, bluest water ever. You're enjoying fish at an outdoor restaurant overlooking the water. You're soaking up the sun. You're sailing on the ocean. And there's just extraordinary nature and beauty around you. It's just unbelievable eye candy. And of course, there are all kinds of islands and cities, whether you're on the Dalmatian coast or in a totally different area of the country. There's so much to see.
Excellent. Well, and as a big history fan, there's a fair amount of that in the country as well. What kind of itinerary are you going to recommend for us?
Well, it does depend on how long you have. I know a
Yep.
lot of people like to plan 1 week. If you're planning a 1 week itinerary in Croatia, I would recommend splitting your time between Dubrovnik and Korčula, plus a day trip to Mijet, which is an island that's between the two of them. But if you have longer, if you have 2 weeks, you can totally add islands that fit your personality and the kind of trip that you're looking for.
All right. Well, you're going to start us in Dubrovnik. What are we going to do in Dubrovnik?
Dubrovnik is just a visually spectacular city. And one of my favorite things to do is walk the city walls, which I do recommend doing late in the day because it gets pretty hot there. It's nice to do it right before sunset.
Yeah.
You can walk the city walls and you can see the orange roofs. And it's just, you can see the hills around you, the water. It's amazing views. Another thing I like to do is to take a cable car to the top of the hill overlooking the old city for sunset. And you get really great views up there. Dubrovnik is a great place to kayak. You can kayak around the old city itself, or you can take a kayak and kayak all the way to Lokrum Island, go around the island and come back.
And that's
I went
the
one
island
way.
that's just not very far
Yes.
off the coast there. That's a park, basically.
Exactly. It's a park. You can't stay there overnight or anything, but it's a little island off the coast of Dubrovnik. So it's kind of fun to just paddle your kayak out there. Although I was pretty glad I only did it one way. It was kind of tiring.
In terms of getting up on the cable car above the town for the sunset, how much time do I need to plan for that? Because I recall some long lines to get on the cable car up to the hill.
Well, I got to tell you, my frame of reference is mostly based in 2020, which was a remarkable time to visit because there were no crowds and no cruise ships in Dubrovnik. I would tell you, I would probably try to get up there half an hour before sunset, at least, just to enjoy the beautiful colors. But one nice thing is that the old city of Dubrovnik becomes a lot less crowded around 5 p.m., 6 p.m. or so, because all of the cruise ship passengers are going back to their ship.
Right. They're all eating dinner back at their ship. And so I've been there when cruise ships are there, and plan an hour to get up to the cable car. It can take a little time. There is a museum up there too. So if you go up a little earlier before the sunset, you can take advantage of that. And I think the museum there, as I recall, talks about the Serbo-Croatian War, where Dubrovnik was besieged by the Croatians and the Montenegrins. And if you're doing that city walk on the city walls, which Kate recommended, which is awesome, I completely love that, you'll notice that many of the roofs are brand new roofs. And that's because a lot of the city was damaged, heavily damaged during that siege way back in my lifetime in the Montenegrin-Croatian War. But they've rebuilt it lovely.
I wanted to say, if you wanted to explore more of that history, something else that I really enjoyed was going to the Red History Museum.
Oh, I don't know that one. Okay.
Yeah, it's relatively new, but they talk all about the communist era. And one thing that's really cool is that they set up all of the rooms to look like they're actually literally just plucked from the 60s or 70s.
Okay.
Like all the appliance, the periodicals, everything. And they let you take pictures in them. So I thought that's kind of a nice place to put on a vintage dress and take some pictures in the 60s and 70s rooms, while also learning about the history of the communist period, which a lot of tour guides don't give you a lot of information about that. They like to focus on what happened before.
So that sounds very similar. You're in Prague now. It sounds very similar to the Museum of Communism in Prague that focuses more on everyday life and not just earth-shattering events and things like that.
Yes, and one thing that I really liked at the museum, they had this wall full of photos from that time, and you just see women with their eyeliner and their fabulous puffed up hair, like at birthday parties, smoking cigarettes, the kids all running around and just wearing these amazing fashions. And I really enjoyed that slice of life of a certain time.
Excellent. Anything else we're going to do in Croatia? You had us kayaking before I took us off on a tangent.
There were some really nice beaches around Dubrovnik as well, and you have to enjoy some of the beaches. What a lot of people don't realize is that the vast majority of beaches in Croatia are not sandy. They are
Right.
either pebble beaches or they are big slabs of rocks. But that's okay. I just recommend packing water shoes. I don't use water shoes anywhere else in the world, but they are very important for Croatia because it really helps you get out. My absolute favorite activity in Dubrovnik, though, that I have to recommend is going for a peka, which is a special kind of dinner. It is a dinner where they cook either octopus or lamb and veal, and they cook it in this big pot underneath coals for a long time with potatoes, all other kinds of vegetables, so that they kind of meld together and get really delicious. And there's this wonderful couple that I met on my last trip that puts on pekas for tourists to come and enjoy. It's called Dubrovnik Eat with Locals. And the couple's names, they are Maria and Zlatko, and they just have an apartment up in the hills in Dubrovnik, and you go in and you join the dinner, and honestly, they treat you like a long-lost family member.
And I recall it's a little harder to order that in a restaurant. As one of the restaurants I was at, you had to order it like hours ahead of time because this takes a while to make.
Yes, definitely. Most places you do have to call ahead to order them. You got to be careful when ordering a pekka. My boyfriend and I had a lot of pekkas last year, and some of them were not that great. But if you go to a really good one, and the one with Dubrovnik Eat with Locals, Maria and Zlatko, theirs was spectacular. We did an octopus pekka with them, and it was so good.
Excellent. Anything else we're going to do in Dubrovnik besides just sit and marvel at the beautiful city?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people like to go on Game of Thrones tours in Dubrovnik because it was the filming location for King's Landing.
Right.
But to be honest, I don't know if that's going to be like something that they're really going to be pushing hardcore long term, just because when Game of Thrones ended, a lot of people were unhappy with the ending and it kind of disappeared from pop culture pretty quickly. So I wouldn't be surprised if those become a little bit less popular over time.
Right. Yeah, we'll see. But we were there with my son I guess the only time I was there, and he really wanted. Oh, that's the staircase that was used in that scene or whatever. And so, yeah, if you are a fan, it can be great fun.
Definitely, and so many of the locals were extras in the show, which is kind of cool.
Well, of course, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Excellent. Are we ready to move on from Dubrovnik?
Sure. Let's talk about Korčula.
Okay.
Now, there are so many islands in Croatia, and people always want to know, what is the best island in Croatia? Well, I think that Korčula is one of the most solid options that you could possibly pick. It has a lot of really, really cool things to do, and it's also pretty close by. It's not that far from Dubrovnik. You can take a ferry right from Dubrovnik if you don't have a car. And Korčula is most famous for being the purported home of Marco Polo. And I say purported because people don't really know for sure, but it's something that the whole island is running with and really enjoying.
Well, and we think of him as being Venetian, but a lot of this coast was ruled by Venice, so that makes sense.
Yes.
And if you walk through a lot of the towns, not Dubrovnik as I recall, but a lot of the other towns, you can see the winged lions of St. Mark that you would see in a Venetian city. So this was apparently a Venetian city?
Yes, it was back in the day. Their empire extended pretty far.
Mostly along the coast because they were traders. And what are we going to do in Korčula?
Well, Korčula has some interesting wine varietals that you can't find anywhere else in the world. My favorite is called Gurk, Grk. And
it sounds like a Klingon drink or something like that.
Yes, please try the Gurk. It's fabulous. And my favorite activity that I did in all of Korčula, maybe even in all of Croatia, was going on a bike wine tour.
Okay.
We started biking from our hotel and we biked down to this town called Lumbarda. And Lumbarda is so nice. This is where like Croatians actually go. They don't really stay in the old city. They prefer to go to Lumbarda. This little town has gorgeous beaches, bright blue ocean waves crashing everywhere. And it's got all of these vineyards in the middle, and just biking through these vineyards. Oh my God. I'm used to biking through vineyards if you're in like Italy or if you're in Napa and you just see green all around you. But having all of those ocean waves too, it's really an unusual experience, and it's so spectacularly beautiful. So that far and away, biking to the wine is my favorite thing that I did there. There are some really nice beaches along the south coast in Corčula. Driving there is a little bit hairy, but it's definitely worth it because they really feel isolated and special.
Now, driving in Croatia in general, I didn't find to be much of a problem.
I love driving in Croatia.
So this is just very windy and small roads?
Oh, Croatia is one of my favorite driving destinations in the world. I highly recommend renting a car in most circumstances. You don't really need one when you're in Dubrovnik. And honestly, if you're spending some time in Corčula, you might only need it for one day to do like a loop around the island and go exploring and stuff. And if that's the case, maybe you'll just want to rent one for one day. But generally speaking, the roads in Croatia are excellent. The drivers are good. The tolls are a little bit on the expensive side for Europe, but nothing insurmountable. And it's a pleasant experience. And I say that considering that their neighbors in Slovenia and Montenegro can kind of be crazy drivers. So it's a lot calmer by comparison in Croatia.
Okay. I didn't find Slovenia to be a problem either, but yeah, I mean, Croatia, brand new, paid for by the European Union roads that were the nicest roads I've ever seen. I mean, literally just gorgeous big highways as you go up from Dubrovnik up towards Zagreb, for instance.
Yeah.
But this one was a little more windy.
Yeah. Yes, it's a small, thin, narrow road, and it's pretty curvy. But if you're pretty comfortable behind the wheel, you should be able to handle it fine.
Okay.
And you can also drive around and stop in small towns in Corčula and visit some of the smaller wineries that they have around there. And another nice thing you can do is that there are these teeny little islands off the coast of Corčula, and you can visit them for the day. They're like two little islands that you can visit, and you can hike all the way around them, or you can just relax on the beach and have some nice fresh seafood and then just take the boat right back to the mainland, which is really nice.
And we're going to grab a ferry from the main city to get out to the islands?
Yes, from Corčula town.
Okay.
Which is the main city. Not the largest city, but it's the main city because that's the main tourism city. It's where the old town is and all that. And Corčula town is also home to one of my favorite cocktail bars in the world. It's called Massimo, and it is actually built inside one of the city walls. Like you have to climb up a ladder to get up there. It's kind of a wind tunnel up there, and the cocktails, they're good. They're not some of the most fantastic ones I've ever had, but it is incredible just to be in the middle of an old city wall tower and looking at the world around you, the mountains, the sea. It's wild.
Well, and you mentioned the mountains. We haven't really talked about, I think a lot of people know what Croatia looks like, but it's basically this little, a lot of it, this part we're on the Dalmatian coast is a little strip of land against the mountains. Basically, you get water and then you get mountains and these little towns in between.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so beautiful. And that's why there are so many islands in the first place, because it's so steep. And something that I have pointed out before on my site is that a lot of people underestimate just how steep it is in a lot of areas. Like, for example, on another island, Brač, we stayed not too far from the town of Bol, like a 10-minute walk from Bol. It didn't look far on the map, but then we realized it was basically a 10-minute walk, almost vertical. And it felt like we were mountain climbing every night. And a lot of the islands are like that. You have to be conscious about how steep they are. And if you want something that's less steep, I just recommend staying close to the water.
Right. Excellent.
Ah bon chien. Bonjour, je suis Theo, a tour leader with Explore. And this is Punti. He's helping us find truffles under the trees next to this beautiful vineyard. Maybe for tomorrow's cooking class? Oui, call is 7 heures. Parfait. 7 o'clock. Not everyone gets to enjoy a Bordeaux sunset this way, but you will if you explore. No, Punti. Search exploreworldwide.com and don't just travel. Explore.
Llévate más de lo que esperas todos los días con el nuevo McValue en McDonald's. Ahora puedes comprar uno y sumarle otro por $1. Así que cuando tu equipo favorito enfrente a sus rivales, enfrenta tus antojos con $5 Meal Deals. Y si estás corriendo para alcanzar el desayuno, corre al app para llevarte ofertas antes del cutoff. Tú decides, y con McValue, tu decisión siempre rinde más. Precios y participación pueden variar. BOGO $1 válido para un producto de igual o menor valor. Debe estar registrado en Rewards para ofertas en el app.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
Where to next?
Miette, which is a very fabulous island. Miette is a nature island, and it's home to Miette National Park. And you can stay there like overnight if you'd like, but I think it works very well as a day trip. You could do it from Dubrovnik if you wanted to, but I actually recommend doing it from Korčula because it's closer and the boat drops you off on the side that is actually closer to Korčula, where the national park is and all that. And Miette is astoundingly beautiful. They've got these day-glow saltwater lakes that you can swim in. You can hike to the top of Monte Cuc, which is a mountain, and get incredible views all over the place. And it's just a wonderful nature island to explore, do a little bit of biking, do a little bit of swimming. You can rent a bike there if you'd like. So that makes a very nice little day trip.
Excellent. I don't know. I've not been to Miette.
Oh, you should go.
I haven't been to the islands, actually, because that's part of the reason why.
Whoa.
There is a lot to see in Croatia, though. And we're giving you a 1 week itinerary or 1 to 2 week itinerary, but you spent 2 months there, and I'm imagining you did not run out of things to see.
Oh, not entirely. I'm already planning how I can go back to Croatia to go to some places that I missed. So many more places to see. If you do have a little bit of extra time, Vis, V-I-S, is a wonderful island. It's the kind of place I recommend going last because you'll be able to compare it to everywhere else. There isn't as much to do on Vis. It's more of the kind of place you go to chill out, but it just feels wonderful. It's calm. It's isolated. It is just beautifully chilled out. It's not too crowded. We've got a lot of sailors there. So that's a very nice place. Another island that a lot of people, probably the most famous island of all, is Hvar, Hvar. And that is known for being a really big party island. If you're looking for the party scene, that is where you go, Hvar town, in the middle of the summer. But it also has some really nice wine, some calmer areas that are better for families. And I also stayed at one of my favorite hotels in the world that just opened last year. It's called Maslina Resort. It is a luxury eco wellness resort. They call it mindful luxury is what they're all about. And it's just this beautiful landscape, really fresh food prepared in interesting ways, and all made of natural materials, just built so naturally into the landscape. And the staff there, it felt like everybody was so thrilled to be there, and just a bit of a magical place.
Excellent. Now that's about a week's worth that you've talked about so far.
I would say if you have a week, do Dubrovnik, Korčula, and Miette.
Okay. And then if we were extending that to 2 weeks.
Yeah, I would do Vis at the end. If you're extending it, you might want to drop into Hvar.
Okay.
Though I might kind of caution you against renting a boat on your own if you're not used to renting a boat. Yeah, my boyfriend and I rented a boat for the day, which is a popular thing to do. You don't need a boat license or anything. And a lot of people like to take the boats to the Pakleni archipelago, which is just off Hvar, and you can find your little stretch of cove to swim in and all that. Yeah, we did that, and we kind of crashed our boat multiple times and eventually had to call the boat place and said, yeah, sorry, but we think you need to pick us up. They were very nice about it. Oh, it was embarrassing. But we definitely learned the hard way that we are not boat people.
Good to know. Good to know.
Yeah. One last place I'm just going to give you, because that's where the other major airport is Split, which is the second largest city in Croatia. It's actually the busiest airport in Croatia. So chances are you are going to go into Split at some point. And Split has Diocletian's Palace, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site,
Right.
and that's a really cool place to explore. But overall, one mistake that I see a lot of travelers make is spending too much time in Split. Personally, I think the perfect amount of time for Split is to arrive midday, spend the afternoon, stay overnight, and then leave the next morning, whether you're driving somewhere or taking a ferry somewhere.
Split, to me, I loved Split because I'm a huge history buff, but it seems to me like a great city to live rather than a visiting
I have
kind of
friends
city.
who live there.
Yeah, it really seems like it's a very livable city where Dubrovnik, for instance, doesn't seem real. Dubrovnik seems somewhat like Disney or something like that. It seems like it's what we think Europe ought to look like. Gorgeous, gorgeous city. But Split is a little grittier.
It is. And, it also tends to, the type of people who tend to plan a longer trip in Split, it tends to attract a lot of lads on holiday types from the UK, the type who come to just do a lot of drinking and all that. So see Split, check it out, tour it, stay 2 nights even if you want to, but don't make it the center of your trip.
But I have great memories of there. I remember as we were going down to Diocletian's Palace, running into one of the Croatian men's singing groups that does a lot of a cappella songs. And I think my son actually bought their CD. It was just, even though we didn't understand a word they were singing, it was just haunting, beautiful music. And they were just down by Diocletian's Palace singing. And there was a great ice cream shop as well. I don't remember the name of it in Split. So we had a good trip there. We talk a little more about Split and some of the coastal destinations in the last episode we did on Croatia with Jay from J-Way Travel. And that's who planned our trip for Croatia that we did. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in that episode. So that will go more inland and talk about Zagreb and some other alternatives to going out to the islands. So a great companion episode to this. They'll overlap in Dubrovnik, but then they'll do a different destinations. Excellent. Are we ready to get into some of our wrap-up questions, or are there other things that we should know before we go to Croatia?
Well, I think I said it already, but definitely bring water shoes. I mean, you don't think you need them, but trust me, as soon as you get onto your first pebble beach, or should I say the first time that you crawl out of the ocean looking like Sandra Bullock at the end of Gravity after she crashed down to Earth, I mean, you're going to wish that you had water shoes on you.
Okay. Best time of year to go to Croatia. You mentioned perfect summer destination.
Yes, Croatia is such a summer destination. I think that September is the sweet spot.
Okay.
Or perhaps even early October. If you're going to Dubrovnik or the far south, I think that early October is the absolute best because it's still swimming weather for most people and it doesn't have the crowds at all. Of course, September has fewer crowds than the main summer months too.
Right.
July and August are very, very, very busy. Once September starts, the kids start going back to school, and that gets rid of most of the family travelers. So I think that late September is really nice, or possibly early October if you are going to the far south.
Yeah, I think we did May or June, which was also lovely. We weren't doing as much swimming, but the weather was great. There weren't as many cruise ships in port and things like that.
Yeah, May and June, they have similar weather to September and even early October, but the main difference is the water isn't as warm.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
So if swimming's a priority, you might want to aim a little later. But if swimming isn't a priority, you might be really happy with May or June as well.
Excellent. And you talked a little bit about food. Are there any other food destinations you want to mention or dishes you want to order?
Well, there are a couple places that I really recommend going to. There's a place in Korčula called Lole Wine Bar, Lole Wine Bar, and they do these really, really creative tapas that are different every single night. They serve local wines. It's kind of in the middle of this alley on a staircase, sort of. The people are wonderful and welcoming, and it's just a total party.
Excellent.
Yeah.
As we go to wrap this up, you're standing in the prettiest spot in Croatia. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
Ooh, that is an extremely difficult question and one that I feel like I am not prepared for. But I'm thinking about Lombarda on the island of Korčula, the town south of the Korčula Old Town, the town that is really mainly for Croatian tourists. And you're just standing in the middle of the vineyards. In the distance, you see church towers and all of these orange roofs. And far back on the mainland, you see the mountains rising around you, and surrounding you, the sea is bright blue and crashing. Yeah, I think that's as close to the most beautiful place in Croatia as you can get.
Well, I think you got that wrong, actually, but
What?
I would say Plitvice National Parks.
Oh, Plitvice. I was in Plitvice on a cloudy, slightly rainy day.
I was there on a very rainy day, and I still think it's one of the prettiest spots that I have been to. And Plitvice, we've talked about it more in the other episode, but it's basically a series of waterfalls and naturally occurring pools. A very pretty national park, more inland than we're going on this particular destination, more off towards Zagreb, but a very, very beautiful spot. And Dubrovnik also with sunset is an amazing place. I say you got it wrong, but there is no wrong answer. There are so many pretty parts of Croatia.
So much to choose from.
Oh yeah. What was the biggest surprise in Croatia? You spent some time there unexpectedly.
Mm-hmm.
What was the biggest surprise?
Well, I'll tell you about a different area that was very surprising to me. It's called Pelishats.
Okay.
Pelishats is a peninsula. It's close to Dubrovnik, and it is where you get the ferry to Korčula. So it's good to add into that area. But it has the feeling of an island, even though it's a peninsula. It has gorgeous beaches. It has some of the best wine ever. Dingač red wine. I think it's the best wine in Croatia, and it grows everywhere. It has oysters. The famous oysters from Stone are from Pelisac. And the thing is, you see zero American tourists there. And that really surprised me. A huge difference from other popular destinations like Dubrovnik, Korčula, Split. But Pelishats kind of attracts Europeans and especially campers. So it is very low key. It feels like you're hanging out with country people. You drop by a winery and a guy says, "Oh yeah, come on in, let me pour you some," as he's having lunch with his family, and pours you a couple wines to taste. So it's very salt of the earth, very country, very casual. That happens to be serving up some of the best red wine and some of the most spectacular beaches you've seen as well.
Interesting. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Croatia.
Oh, I guess only in Croatia do people from Dubrovnik stay way out of the city. People in Dubrovnik who live in the old city, nobody actually lives in the old city during the summer months because they can make way too much money renting them out on Airbnb. Yeah, so it's kind of weird that it's the most beautiful city in the country and there's a mass exodus of locals every single year.
Well, and that's not unrelated to my feeling that Split is a city where you live and Croatia is a city, Dubrovnik's a city that you visit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are plenty, all of my friends in Dubrovnik, they don't live in the old city. There's plenty of city that isn't the old city itself.
Right.
It's up in the hills and all that.
Interesting. And if I had you summarize Croatia in just 3 words, what 3 words are you going to use? Beaches,
sunshine, stone.
Stone. Okay.
Yeah, there's a really famous white stone that comes from Brač, on one of the other islands, and they really love to show it off. Stone buildings. I think rumor has it the White House is actually built out of Brač stone. I kind of need to verify that, though. I would need to look that up. And even the award I received recently, it was made of Brač stone. And I always said to myself that someday in my home, I want to have a sink that is made out of Brač stone.
Well, and if we wanted to send people to your award-winning article or articles on Croatia, where are we going to send them?
Just go to adventurouskate.com, then click on destinations and click on the Croatia button.
And is there one particular article that people ought to read?
Yes. This year I wrote, and I just edited it. It's called Your First Post-COVID Trip Should Be to Croatia.
Okay. And make the argument here. Why Croatia?
Because, well, I originally wrote it in early 2020 before it was certain that they would open for this year, but I felt that they would because they did open to Americans last year as well. They are open to Americans. They have low COVID numbers. But more than anything, Croatia is a destination where you can do everything outside and distance. And me, I'm fully vaccinated, and most people I know who are traveling there would be fully vaccinated.
Right.
Even with that, I feel like your first destination after the last year and a half we have, you need something that's a little easier, a little bit friendlier, a little bit more low key. Like, I'm not ready to go to Hong Kong and be packed like sardines in a can anywhere.
No, our first trips are outside too. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, exactly. Croatia is a place where you do everything outside. Those 2 months that I was in Croatia, I think I ate indoors twice. And one was because I was there during the annual Dalmatia downpour that happens once a year and is really intense, and that's it.
Yeah, no, I think you're right that this year is a great year for, well, we're seeing record numbers of people at national parks just doing road trips and things like that. It's not probably the best year to go to some place where you're spending all the times in the museums or downtown, or certainly places. I have eaten inside once, even though I've traveled during the pandemic, mostly locally, and only recently now getting back on planes. And it's going to be a while till I'm comfortable doing the indoor and the urban kind of destinations. whether that's scientific or not, it's certainly the case that a lot of people are going to feel much more comfortable eating out in a piazza, eating out and doing camping or doing sailing or something else that's outdoors. Excellent.
Yes, definitely.
Well, Kate, I'm so glad we had you on the show finally, and so glad to talk to you about Croatia. And thank you for sharing with us your love for Croatia.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been a pleasure.
The wrongs we must right. The fights we must win. The future we must secure together for our nation. This is what's in front of us. This determines what's next for all of us. We are Marines. We were made for this.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. From streaming to shopping, Prime helps you get more out of your passions. So whether you're a fan of true crime or prefer a nail-biting novel from time to time, with services like Prime Video, Amazon Music, and fast free delivery, Prime makes it easy to get more out of whatever you're into or getting into. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
As always, a special thanks to the patrons of the show who help support the show financially. I understand not everyone can, so I appreciate those who do. If you would like to support the show and get the episodes a little earlier, get them without ads, and get a monthly Zoom call, then go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. I am back from travel, and you'll hear more about my trip actually in both the next two episodes, because we're going to do an episode on the cruise that I did with Windstar, which did not go where we were planning on going. Welcome to 2021. And then also the trip that I did before that to see my daughter, where we went to the Blue Ridge Parkway in Asheville and Smoky Mountains National Park. And we're going to cover some of that the week after when we talk about the Blue Ridge Parkway. So be sure to subscribe if you want to hear those episodes. One thing I should say, too, is when you subscribe to podcasts, you have the ability in most podcatchers to subscribe to every new episode or to just the most recent episode. And if depending on when you log in, if you only do the most recent episode, you may miss some. And so if you go back and look, you may have missed episodes of Amateur Traveler, especially if you're using the Apple Podcast app, because they had a problem in their latest version. So anyway, I just don't want you to miss out on things. I heard recently from Tom, who said, "Love the show, never miss an episode. The best of the week is when your show drops. Haven't traveled much in the last year, but I'm looking forward to a trip soon. I'm a country counter and haven't reached the number you have, but I have traveled to the great city of Wadsworth, Ohio, apparently your hometown. I had to be there for a few days for work, but I enjoyed the town and the people were warm. What more could you ask? Keep up the great work. You make a great podcast. Looking forward to your next show on Argentina. I lived in Uruguay for a year schooling and traveled to Argentina twice." Tom. Well, and Tom, it sounds like you remember Wadsworth better than I do, because I moved away when I was 3.5, but I did have to mention that in the episode on Ohio, that I am a Buckeye. I can't claim to be from California. I just don't remember Ohio other than one or two memories from the time. You mentioned being a country counter. I actually just recently updated both the page on my site that says what UNESCO World Heritage sites I've been to, because I got 3 new ones, as well as the country page, the page that lists what countries I've been to. And I updated it to count 2 ways. One way to count countries is the UN recognized countries. I'm still counting some of the places like Taiwan and Palestine that are under a little bit of debate there, but then there's also a country counter way that a lot of people use, where they also count non-contiguous parts of the country, and in that way you would also count Hawaii and
San Juan separately from the U.S. And so I sort of changed it to have two different counts in there depending on which method you're using. And that makes quite a difference whether I've been to 64 countries or 84 countries and territories is kind of the second one. But I think my real way I would personally count is probably somewhere in between, but it was just an interesting exercise to go through. I do want to welcome to Amateur Traveler our latest patron, and I forgot to mention that, and that is Jeremy Cotronio. And Jeremy, thank you so much for supporting Amateur Traveler. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more.